Our discussion tonight focuses on the state of the nation, particularly with respect to accountability and corruption. My guests tonight, Senator Kembi Gitura, Honorable Abdikadir Aden, and Dr. Alex Awiti. The question we're asking you on Twitter tonight is, has the president been successful in the war on graft since he took over in 2013? Please do let us know your thoughts on that and much more. In fact, the other question is, what is the yardstick for gauging success in the war on corruption? So some interesting thoughts coming in. Keep yours coming through as well at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. That will be our discussion coming up a little later on. Welcome to the program. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and our sign language interpreter is William Silla. So let's start off with some politics, shall we? President Uhuru Kenyatta's latest tour of the coast appears to be bearing fruit after more coast leaders, including Governor Hussein Dado, ditched the opposition ODM for the ruling Jubilee. Dado formally joined Jubilee during a rally held at the Tononoka grounds in Mombasa just a day after Taita Taveta Senator Dan Mwazo defected to the same party. KTN's Francis Ontomwa is preparing that report on the latest defections, and we'll have it to you in just a short while. Meanwhile, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka is rooting for the creation of Prime Minister's position and those of his deputies in a bid to share the national cake to the various communities. Musyoka says this will be done within 18 months of NASA coming to power. But as Murimi Mwangi reports, some members of the NASA Management Committee argue that creation of additional political positions is not a priority in the ongoing negotiations within NASA.
In what is arguably the first disclosure by a core principal in the National Super Alliance about a possible roadmap towards the reintroduction of the Prime Minister's position, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka has now pledged to push for the creation of the post with 2 deputies. This will be done within the first 6 months of his government, should he be picked as the NASA presidential candidate.
Katiba tulionao ni nzuri sana, lakini inasababisha matokeo ambayo hayakubaliki. Tutaregesha kiti cha prime minister, tutakuwa na deputies prime minister. Wacha waziri anaozungumza juu ya Omar. Sioni pwani mkikosa minimum, and I say minimum, deputy prime minister.
But Kalonzo's statement could stir fresh controversy within a 12-member NASA management committee tasked to craft a formula for the selection of the presidential flag bearer. ANC's lead negotiator, Kipruto Kirwa, favors an arrangement where the negotiations will be confined within the political posts enshrined in the current constitution, a position reportedly supported by a majority of the committee members. Sources within the opposition indicate that part of the talks revolved around the possibility of the inclusion of the Nairobi governorship and the Senate majority leader or speaker's job as backup options for the 2 principals who miss out of the presidential ballot.
But the guiding principle is that we do not want the experience of 2002, that upon formation of the government, we went asunder because we did not carry the spirit of coalition beyond the election.
Sisi tunawaambia NASA, the voice of the Kenyan people, the demand of the coast people is that Kalonzo Musyoka becomes the flag bearer.
A recent poll by research firm Infotrack among NASA supporters placed ODM leader Raila Odinga as the most popular presidential candidate at 68.3%, followed by Kalonzo Musyoka at 13.1%. While ANC's Musalia Mudavadi was third at 12.3%, as Fort Kenya's Moses Wetangula trailed at only 2.2%.
Infotrack, jameni wacheni kupotosha akili za Wakenya. Wakenya wamechoka na kupotozwa. Had to be given fake, cooked up figures.
This as leaders drawn from the Orange Party. Ford claims that the opposition is losing grip of the coast. This after it lost Taita Taveta Senator Dan Mwazo and woman representative Joyce Lay to Jubilee alongside Tana River Governor Hussein Dado.
Hebu uliza wananchi wataita Taveta. Wananchi wataita Taveta ni ODM. Hata sioni wakibadilika.
Hata watoke Nairobi, Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta na Ruto waje wafanye kazi zao za urais na makamu wa rais katika ikulu ya Mombasa, kwani haitaingia katika chama cha Jubilee.
NASA leaders say the coalition flag bearer could be unveiled during these rallies early next month. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News, Nairobi.
All right, so now we want to take you back to our top story this Sunday evening, and it is about the president's latest tour to the coast region that appears to be bearing fruit after more leaders, including Governor Hussein Dado, ditched the opposition wiper for the ruling Jubilee. Dado formally joined Jubilee during a rally that was held at the Tononoka grounds in Mombasa, just a day after Taita Taveta Senator Dan Mwazo defected to the Jubilee party. KTN's Francis Ontomwa now reports on the latest defections and whether they will translate into votes for Jubilee in the August elections.
The climax of President Uhuru Kenyatta's visit to the coast was at the historical Tononoka grounds in his high-profile tour of the town, accompanied with his deputy William Ruto, which saw a number of opposition leaders change their jerseys to join the ruling Jubilee. Tana River Governor Hussein Dado and Taita Taveta Senator Dan Mwazo became the latest high-profile leaders from the region to have fallen for the Jubilee allure.
Leo tumeamua kujiunga bila kushurutishwa, bila kulazimishwa, bila kuhongwa. Tumeamua ya kwamba tutasimama na serikali ambayo imejitolea kwa maendeleo.
Ni wakati umefika tujiunge na serikali. Maendeleo watu wa pwani ndio tunataka.
Sisi haja yetu ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba tuko na nchi ambayo iko na usalama. Sisi haja yetu ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba kila jamii na kila dini iko ndani ya serikali.
Viongozi na watu wa pwani wamekubaliana na Wakenya wenzao tutembee barabara hii, tumuunge mkono Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta na tuunge mkono Jubilee.
As the race to woo the coast region continues, discussions are now emerging on whether this defection will translate into numbers come the August general election.
Tusaidiane, mtupatie watu ambao tutaweza kufanya kazi pamoja nao.
Lazima uende kwa commander in chief. Huwezi kuenda kwa komanda mwenye risasi moja. Lazima uangalie yule ambaye anamiliki.
The Jubilee music courting everyone here, including cabinet secretaries.
Unataka maendeleo haya yaendelee asiendelee? Mheshimiwa Uhuru aendelee asiendelee? Hapa ndio nimeona uongozi ambao unania kubadilisha nchi yetu kwa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta.
And as the luring continued, Majority Leader Aden Duale promised to unleash a thunderbolt. And here was his finding about their competitors.
And we know they have assembled a team of software hackers. And we know that they are trying to establish a parallel tallying center that will be manned by foreigners. We know your tricks, we know your plan.
Less than a kilometer from this location, local security apparatus halted a planned ODM meeting that was supposed to be spearheaded by Mombasa Governor Hassan Ali Joho. The opposition was not amused.
I don't know when we went back to the old constitution where the police issue licenses, but it seems that this government has definitely taken us back to those days.
President Uhuru will tomorrow oversee the commissioning of the Stall Mtongwe Ferry, a function that will also be attended by Governor Joho. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
Meanwhile, KANU party has reacted angrily to a statement made by National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale at the Tononoka grounds in Mombasa today. The party, through its organizing secretary, Abdul Rahman Bafadil, said the party chair, Gideon Moi, had entered an agreement with President Uhuru Kenyatta to support him in this year's general election. Bafadil says that in the agreement, KANU is to field candidates in the elections from the MCA positions to the level of governor. He added that the majority leader was worried because he has found himself partyless. The KANU organizing secretary accused Duale of not working for the interests of President Kenyatta, who is seeking re-election in the coming elections. All right, now the race for the 47 gubernatorial seats arguably remains the most competitive compared to the other elective seats in the August election. So tonight on Spotlight 2017, our reporter Chris Dairu delves into the intrigues behind the decision by some governors to form their own political parties and interrogates their chances at the polls against candidates sponsored by the country's main political outfits.
With precisely a month to the deadline for political parties to have conducted their primaries ahead of the August polls, governors have strategized themselves to ensure that they are not locked out of the elections and that their names are on the ballot. Given that some of the governors have fallen out to the mother parties that sponsored them to the position in the 2013 elections, they have gone back to the drawing board and either formed their own political parties or revived others in preparation for the August elections.
Many politicians don't believe that there will be free and fair nominations within their parties. And past experience has shown that there's a lot of favoritism and undercutting within parties. And therefore, every politician wants to feel secure that you have an opportunity to be in the ballot box, to compete for the position they want to run for.
Meru Governor Peter Munya opted out of the Jubilee bandwagon after APK party dissolved into the Jubilee party. APK former party leader Meru Senator Kireto Murungi wants to unseat Munya as governor on the Jubilee party ticket, a move that pushed Munya to revive the PNU party, where he is assured of a direct nomination to face his rival Kireto Murungi at the ballot.
Those who have moved to other parties are the stronger governors. It is those who are confident enough that they can go against the grain and win. Those who are not moving are the ones who are afraid, because they fear that if they move from the secure party that is supported in that region, they will lose elections. So
after falling out with Deputy President William Ruto, Bomet Governor Isaac Ruto ditched the defunct URP party, of which he was a co-founder, and formed the Chama Cha Mashinani party, and which he intends to defend his seat. But Isaac will be facing either the Jubilee heavyweight Sotik MP Dr. Joyce Laboso or former Konoin MP Dr. Julius Kones.
Kenya ni ya kila mtu. Na hakuna maneno ya kusema hapa ni Jubilee, sijui hapa ni nini. Hata sisi watu wasije hapa tuseme hapa ni nini. Tunasema kila mtu akuja aombe kiti ya hiyo ya juu. Wakuje.
Chacha. Sindio?
Machakos Governor Dr. Alfred Mutua also ditched a Wiper party after rebelling against party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and Machakos Senator Johnston Mudhama, and formed a Maendeleo Chap-Chap, under which he will defend his seat.
This party is called Maendeleo Chap-Chap. Maendeleo kwa sababu wananchi wanataka maendeleo. Chap-Chap kwa sababu wananchi wamechoka kungojea. Tutangojea mpaka lini?
Na Kenya Party has also ripped Tharaka Nithi Governor Samuel Ragwa, who was elected on a TNA ticket, as well as Embu Governor Martin Wambora. However, most of these governors support the re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Tukasema yule tutapigia kura ya rais 2017 ni Uhuru Kenyatta. Kwa hivyo hii chama ya PNU haina vita na president wa Kenya. Tunaelewana? Kwanza tunamsaidia. Kwa sababu watu hawezi kuwa kwa chama moja wote. Wakipigana huko, wengine washini wakose mahali pa kwenda, wapiga kura watatoka kupiga kura.
Our candidate of choice is President Uhuru Kenyatta, who we believe shares the same principles of development. Because we need to move this country from the politics of seeking power, from the politics of insults.
In the opposition, the National Super Alliance, NASA, is still grappling with an internal suggestion to adopt joint nominations among the candidates from the affiliate parties in the alliance. For instance, in Mombasa County, the three main contenders for the gubernatorial seat are in NASA: the incumbent Governor Ali Hassan Joho on an ODM ticket, current Senator Hassan Omar on a Wiper ticket, and Nyali MP Hezron Awiti still on a Wiper ticket. Should the talks on joint nominations flop, some observers argue that the Jubilee candidate Suleiman Shabal could get a head start come August elections. Chris Dairo, KTN News.
Following the runaway security in some parts of the country, the Police Reforms Working Group Kenya and the Baringo Human Rights Consortium are now calling upon the government to transfer all local and county administration as well as security personnel in the North Rift, citing their alleged inefficiency in handling the now volatile area.
Following the runaway insecurity in some parts of the country, the Police Reforms Working Group Kenya and the Baringo Human Rights Consortium are now calling upon the government to transfer all local and county administration as well as security personnel in the North Rift region, citing the alleged inefficiency in handling the now volatile area. But speaking in Sitoto area in Keio South constituency, Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen and other local leaders supported the ongoing operation to restore peace in the area.
Haiwezekani kwamba wakora watapita Tiati constituency mchana wakibeba bunduki, wakitafuta ng'ombe ya watu, wakikuja kuua watoto, na sisi Wakristo wa upande huo hatujajitoa kusema tumeona mkora hapa, tupigie ule Mkristo mwingine wa Marakwet tuhakikishe kwamba tumemaliza hii uhasama.
The Elgeyo Marakwet leaders urged their neighbors from Baringo and West Pokot to cooperate with security agencies in order to end the fighting in that area. The leaders also rallied their support behind President Uhuru Kenyatta's efforts to restore peace in the area.
Ikiwa hata Deputy President alikuja hapa na akasema anatoa shoot to kill order, hiyo ni ya kusimamisha wakora wenye wanabeba mabunduki. Lakini ya maana zaidi ni kwamba wakati serikali inasimamisha wakora kufanya hivyo, sisi kama Wakristo, sisi kama viongozi, sisi kama jamii tuonyeshe mwelekeo unaofaa ya kwamba tuko tayari kuunganisha watu na kumaliza shida yenye iko kati yetu.
Among those who spoke was Olympic champion Wilson Kipsang, who is also eyeing a political seat in the area.
I think we have a way of addressing issues. It is not in order for one to maybe stand in public and talk negative about the president. I think it is not really good. So my eye to the people of citizens of Kenya, that wherever we are, we should try to make sure that we embrace peace at all times.
Kwa sababu ndugu yetu Tononoka alienda huko akasema ati president anataka kuleta watu ya kabila yake, walete wakuje huko, wachukue mashamba, mafuta wabebe kwao. You know, when you insult the president like that, he has also a right to tell you hii sheria inaundwa na Senate National Assembly and we must respect. I don't know, sijawahi kuona mwaka ingine hata mzee Moi akiwa uongozi, hata mzee Kibaki akiwa kiongozi, penye rais ametusiwa na viongozi wengine kuliko this time.
The leaders also rubbished the recent InfoTrack survey, which portrayed Rift Valley as having 30.6% of voters who are still undecided on who they will vote for. Elvis Kosgei, KT News, in Elgeyo Marakwet County.
Former civic leaders and MCAs are now accusing the Salaries and Remuneration Commission of discrimination after it rejected their plans to award themselves hefty benefits. They argue that there are adequate funds to cater for the packages as passed by the various county assemblies. Our reporter Fred Muturi brings us this story from Kisii County.
We met Henry Onditi in his small farm while taking care of his crops, and from the look of things, this former civic leader's life has been condemned to abject poverty. The father of 6 cannot take care of his children who are in school and at the same time take care of his ailing wife.
There's no improvement. Naona kama inapiti sasa atakatwa hiyo matiti. Alikuwa alifati aende Nairobi hospital. Yeah, na mimi sina pesa.
Like many other former civic leaders, Onditi is not happy with the recent pension plan for former legislators who served between 1984 and the year 2002 that may cost taxpayers up to 3 billion shillings, a plan that saw former civic leaders locked out.
President amekuwa automatic. Akiretire anapatiwa benefits automatic. Juzi unaona nani MPs walipitisha nao imekuwa kama automatic, sasa ni automatic. Sasa watu tumepaki ni zizi.
Even though the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has rejected proposals to pay retired members of parliament and councillors hefty pensions, MCAs are vowed to move on.
And I think the perception or the attitude of constitutional commissions is to blame or to, kind of distance themselves, especially from initiatives which have been taken up by the county assemblies, which I think is wrong.
Onditi is quick to defend former civic leaders against claims they did not serve well while they were in power.
Ate makansila wangesave. Sasa na hii tuseme 15,000 ndio naweza kusevaji sasa. Maana hii ni kazi ya wananchi. Ukisikia matanga ikitokea wanasema kansila yako wapi. Ukifika hapo unatoa 1,000.
And Onditi is not a happy man and he lays blame squarely on the SRC.
Kama ni governor, nimemuomba aandike memorandum. Sasa irudi katika assembly. Assembly ifanye amendments.
In Nyamira County, a bill awarded former civic leaders 1 million shillings each and 15,000 shillings monthly stipend. A package Nyamira Assembly Speaker Josh Nyamuko terms as economically fair.
In fact, a majority of them are suffering. Don't forget, these guys were not on salary. What they used to do is to draw allowances.
And in Kisii County, Governor James Ongwae and his deputy Josh Mangi are set to earn a cumulative retirement package of 18 million and 4-wheel drive vehicles to be replaced every 4 years. This is according to recommendations in the 2016 Kisii County Retirement Benefits Bill.
Tunachua hii ni pesa za serikali na mahitaji ni mengi na kila department inahitaji pesa, lakini tunamuomba kama ni reduce, ikuwe reduced.
Because what we're going to do is to seek for consensus from the control of budget. We are going to formulate our budget. We'll make sure that we factor in that package which we passed, of course supported by the law which we are going to formulate and finish. Then after that we'll approach COB. I don't know how Sala Serem comes in this.
According to SRC, such schemes will not only go against the law, but also lead to an additional cost to the consolidated fund.
They give proposals on how we can have a unified approach.
According to SRC, the proposals went against the Constitution, and the former civic leaders have to wait until an amicable solution is arrived at. Fred Muturi, KTN News, Kisii.
The government maintains that doctors must return to work before any further negotiations can be convened. State House spokesperson Manoa Esipisu, speaking in Mombasa, said the government will not engage with doctors on an illegal strike. Last week, President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Council of Governors directed striking workers to return to work, withdrew its offer, and pulled out of the negotiations. Doctors' union officials have asked for one more chance to negotiate, but insist the strike, now in its 98th day, will continue. Parties in the doctors' pay dispute are set to appear at the Court of Appeal tomorrow, after the court last week gave them one more week to reach consensus.
Doctors on strike resume duty effective immediately before any further negotiations could be convened in respect of remuneration or in fact any other welfare issues. We thank the doctors that have so far gone back to work. We note the union's statement on the subject, which was sent to doctors last night. But the President's resolve and message remains absolutely the same. There will be no more chicanery on this subject.
All right, so on Checkpoint tonight, we begin our week-long coverage on the state of the nation as President Uhuru Kenyatta prepares to make his final address of his first term in office on Wednesday. Today we focus on the war on graft and accountability. My guests are here and ready to have this discussion. We have Senator Kembi Gitura, who's also the Deputy Speaker of the Senate. We have Honorable Abdikadir Aden, as well as Dr. Alex Awiti. The question we're asking you on social media is, has the President been successful in the war on graft under his tenure so far? keep your comments coming in. The hashtag to use is checkpoint at KTN News at Yvonne Okwara. And that discussion is coming up after this short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to the show. Remember to keep your comments coming in. The president will be making his final State of the Nation address this week, Wednesday. And all week here on KTN News, we'll be taking a look at various aspects of his administration. We'll be taking a look at economy, the health, the state of corruption, infrastructure, among many other issues in the country. So tonight on Checkpoint, we're kicking that off and we're taking a look at the war on corruption. It's definitely been a big issue, a big thorn in the flesh for the government. And you will remember during that State of the Nation address in 2015, he released that list of, now known as the list of shame. And we saw a lot of cascading effects from that. We've also seen some frustration expressed by the president himself. So we want to speak about this issue and sort of interrogate that for you. So the question we're asking you today is, has President Uhuru Kenyatta been successful in the war on corruption during his tenure? Please send in your thoughts at KTN News at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag is checkpoint. That's how I'll be tracking your feedback. Oh, you can also use SMS. The number is 22155, and that is absolutely free. So my guests tonight, as we introduce them before the break, I'll do that one more time. We've got Senator Kembi Gittura. Thank you very much for making it on the show. He's also the Deputy Speaker of the Senate and Senator for Murang'a. And we also have Honorable Abdikadir Aden, who's the Member of Parliament for Balambala, and Dr. Alex Sawiti, who's the Director of the East African Institute at the Aga Khan University and a regular analyst with us here. Thank you all for making the time. Senator, let's start with you. Obviously, how would you rate, the president's war on corruption from 2013 up until this moment? We're going into an election. Much has happened. Many scandals have come out. What would you say has been the hallmark of this fight?
Well, thank you very much. That's a big question. I heard you say that the president is making his final State of the Nation address on Wednesday.
Before the election, yes.
I think it's good to clarify and say that he is making his final State of the Nation address in his first term. He will make a similar address at the beginning of the first year of his first term next year. So I think it's important.
We shall wait and see.
I think it's important to make that clarification.
I think the voters will decide. But
that's
anyway,
right.
Yeah.
But you made an important question, which is how successful has been the president's fight on corruption. And the reason I say it's an interesting question is because everybody seems to think that the fight against corruption is the president's fight. It isn't. It is a fight by all of us, because all of us must take part and all of us must take a very serious part in the fight against corruption. The president has a role to play in that, and I would say he's done what he could have done in the circumstances, because he's brought out the names of the people, some of them very close to him, that he made to step aside because of the corruption allegations against them. And he's not taken them back to his cabinet. He has not taken anybody back to his cabinet, since that list of shame. But then you must remember that we are operating under very different circumstances, under a new constitution, which quite clearly sets out the various independent bodies of this government and the work that they have to do. We have independent commissions. We can immediately talk about the EACC. You can talk about the courts, and you can even talk about the DCI, the Director of Criminal Investigations. All these are extremely independent people. And the president can recommend or give names to them because he is satisfied that there are corrupt practices against certain people because of the evidence that is there. But once he's done that, like he did in 2015 in the State of Nation address that he did, and he gave out so many names of people that were suspected to have been involved in corrupt practices. He did what he had to do, but he gave directions to the independent commissions and bodies in the government. What has happened? I don't know why people continue to blame the president about these things, because people must start by appreciating that on 27th of August 2010, we had a new constitution, and it said that you cannot interfere with the work of these people. So sometimes I think we expect too much from the president. We expect him to break the constitution so that he can be seen to be the president. We expect him to do certain things. But every time a lot of these matters have gone to court, for instance, you've seen the courts reversing what the president has directed. You've seen Parliament itself reversing the presidential appointments. You've seen matters going to the DPP and him saying there is not sufficient evidence to charge this person. I mean, I think sometimes we expect too much from a president in the current constitutional dispensation.
All right. Mheshimiwa?
I think I beg to differ with Senator. My view is the president is the head of the executive. Ultimately, he takes responsibility for corruption and failures within the executive. The unfortunate thing is that despite all the naming and shaming of names and removing of cabinet secretaries, the truth of the matter is corruption continues to happen in the executive. And this is where we have a challenge with. And he is the head of the executive. And I think that's where the biggest challenge comes in. Why is it that time and again we see the president talking tough about corruption, talking about zero tolerance on corruption, yet year on year these things continue to happen. I sit in the Public Accounts Committee and I can tell you all the financial years that we've looked at, including the one we're looking at now, which was just last year's, 2014-15, serious failures in different ministries and different departments. So really, taking a shot at the big names out there, the ministers, for example, who we can dismiss, is not necessarily where the solution is going to come from.
What more do you think the president could have done? Because you're saying he's the head of the executive,
yes,
granted.
Yes.
What more do you think he could have done?
What I think is that, unlike you and I, the president enjoys the privilege of knowing a lot more details on issues, on people, on exactly what's happening. I am sure that he is well informed where he is through the intelligence briefs that he gets, that where exactly corruption is occurring and the points where they are. Unfortunately, some of this corruption leads to big offices. And we will be very surprised to see how comes the president will not be in the know. And these are questions that we put as a Public Accounts Committee to the agencies that are expected to inform the head of the executive, asking him, do you really give accurate information on these issues? How comes you are the NIS, for example, and you want to tell us that you don't know what is happening and who's looting the public coffers? These things happen through financial institutions, from ministries to either private accounts or of companies or individuals. People make calls and people communicate and travel and do all sorts of things to enable money laundering and corruption. All this is issues that I cannot personally say that the president will not know.
I think that's
he must be in the know, and if he is, then he must take the appropriate action. You see, it is about making sure that you create systems, you perfect systems.
Okay.
You remove this minister, but the same rot continues to stay in the same ministry.
All right.
So what have you done?
Now that you're talking about systems, and we'll come to Dr. Awiti in just a moment. Now that you're talking about systems, well, some would say that the president has made an attempt to do that. The Bribery Act 2016 was passed. There's the multi-agency task force that he put together. There's the Asset Recovery Agency, which has succeeded in getting us that money back from Jersey. And some say that all of these then contribute to the fight against corruption, and that is making an attempt at strengthening institutions and processes.
Yeah, you see, I agree with you that there are a few things that have been done that, in fact, not few, very many things. The multi-agency task force, the asset recovery, all of which we've had an engagement with as a Public Accounts Committee. But sometimes some of these institutions are themselves in conflict of the other. One is looking for what the other is probably not looking at. And one tells you that, I can only go so far and recommend prosecution, and prosecution is either not being done. And the prosecution side will tell you, look, I can't prosecute without, a clear proof of evidence, so that
But that was what the multi-agency task force was supposed to cure, that everybody is talking to everyone. So is it your statement that it's not
Unfortunately,
successful?
it is not been. It's not successful. If it were, then the corruptions that we continue to see till this day in the executive will not have continued to be.
All right, Dr. Awiti, how do we rate success? Mheshimiwa says, well, he doesn't see much of that. There seems to be a lot of strengthening of systems, but corruption continues. I mean, a lot of the Kenyans that are tweeting are saying we don't see anything. People are baying for blood. People want convictions. How would you rate that? And do you think that's the only yardstick towards success in the war on corruption?
I think what is deeply frustrating about these conversations is the national hypocrisy around these issues. The lifeblood of politics and business in this country is corruption, period. You gentlemen sitting here, sit in institutions that have members have been involved in this whole graft within government. You know, the NYS scandal, for instance, the members of the Senate who have been named in this. In the tendering process in NYS and various other government agencies, members of parliament have been named. The Public Accounts Committee has had upheaval. Ababu Nwamba is no more, under a catastrophic thunderstorm of allegations of graft. Now, the public itself, 30% of young Kenyans believe that it is profitable to give or take a bribe.
40%.
That was a survey that we did. So it is a pervasive problem in this country. And right now, in the counties that is far away from the limelight, there is insane amounts of corruption. Governors instantly have become millionaires, flying choppers that they own. So I think, first of all, it's a fundamental failure of citizenship in this country. Not even leadership. Citizenship that is basically surrendered its responsibility of being actively engaged in the matters of governance. The other one is that it is extremely problematic that somebody would imagine that you set up a different commission to deal with issues of graft when this is just theft. These are thieves. Why do we create an anti-corruption commission to deal with these things? There are enough legal processes and procedures in our criminal code everywhere you turn. Why are we wasting public money creating these institutions that are basically toothless? So I think, in my view, there is a fundamental level of accountability that lies at the foot of the president. He has to lead differently on this matter. So while there are considerable constraints to his power, given the new constitution, but I think Mr. Kenyatta should bring some new imagination and some new thinking in the way that we create and coordinate our various institutions to deal with this. This, to me, is what I would expect from him. But I don't expect him, you know, it was a very high bar. You know, it was pretty insane for him to say that he might even deal with the same, because the public really loves corruption. I might even say that you could cause the economy of this country to shrink by about 1% if you dealt definitively with graft, because you will starve this economy of private resources for investment. A lot of that comes from corruption.
But the question that I got to be asked was this: what has the president done and what can he do about it? And I think that's an important question. I do not think anybody sitting here or anywhere in the Republic can pretend that there is no corruption in this country. There is a lot of corruption, and it is rampant, and something has to be done about it. And the thinking of the new constitution, when it created all these institutions, was that this would be an easier way of removing the power from the center, so that there is no protectionism, and issues of corruption and those are kind of issues can be dealt with at that devolved level. But the truth of the matter, like Dr. Awiti says, is that corruption has been devolved to the counties. And we have an anti-corruption commission, for instance. The law provides clearly that there should be lifestyle audits on anybody. And this should be done and can be done at random. When you talk about the NYS, for instance, and what Parliament has done about it, when you talk about corruption within Parliament itself, who is supposed to deal with it? How can the president control Parliament, which is an independent institution? It should have its own mechanisms. And these are national mechanisms where people are arrested and they are taken to a court of law after investigation. But then what control does the president have on the judiciary? The days are finished, and I would like to say this clearly. The days are finished when the president could pick a phone and call the Chief Justice or a judge dealing with a matter and tell him, I want that person jailed for 7 years, or I want so and so detained. Those days are gone. But look at an issue, for instance, about these audits, lifestyle audits. What is so difficult about the EACC picking a person like Kembi Gitura and telling them, the same way the KRA does an in-depth on a person, tell you we want to do at random, you know, a lifestyle audit on you. I want to know, as you put it so collective, Yvonne, I want to know, how is it that now you have a helicopter and 2 years ago you are a pauper?
Okay, Senator, let's address a little bit of what Mheshimiwa was talking about in terms of, you know, the war on graft, and some cabinet secretaries were, you know, sent home after that now very famous list of shame. But then you're starting to see a number of those individuals now getting into politics and now running on the Jubilee Party,
Exactly.
which the president, by the way, is a party leader of the Jubilee Party, and in a place that he probably has considerable influence, we would imagine. Yet we see a number of these individuals now wanting to run on a Jubilee Party ticket, people that he supposedly purged because of the scourge of corruption. And then some say, you know, it's speaking from both ends of the mouth.
But you see now, if for instance, Jubilee Party, the party that I subscribe to myself, rejected somebody who wants to run on Jubilee ticket because of suspicions, that person will go to court. And I want to tell you...
But the people, the president asked those people on suspicion to step aside.
It is true because he had evidence, but he gave them out to another institution to deal with that evidence. A lot of these issues are still pending. We are still hoping that we are going to get results. But like I said earlier, and you can take this to the bank, the president cannot possibly now call the Chief Justice and tell him, I want you to jail so-and-so.
Okay, but the president can say, we will be intolerant of corruption within our party.
I'm sure a lot of us are intolerant about corruption. But the problem we have is all this multifaceted way of doing things, right? And if given the issue, the example, for instance, of the Jubilee Party, you see the president, you can say, you are trying to say that the president is tolerating corrupt people whom he sacked and still are coming back to want to be vetted and become Jubilee aspirants. You see, what can he do? Because if he cannot tell them, do not clear so-and-so, because if they do, and you've seen it already happening, if somebody is not cleared, they go to court. If the court grants you an injunction, what can you do? What can the president do? What can the party do? So it's an indictment against the whole of society, and I think Dr. Awiti put it very well. It's that people have come to glorify corruption. People think it is good to be corrupt. And that's why you find 40% of our own youth, people under 30, saying that they will do anything to get rich, even if it means using corruption or other such as thing. So the indictment is actually quite big, and we might be dealing with these issues superficially. We need to deal with it, the endemic, cause of all these problems.
But if I might just say, if I might just add, I think part of it, and people like you who have a big voice, I think we need to expand this conversation beyond just a focus on government.
Exactly.
There is insane amounts of corruption in the private sector. You know, Safaricom, for instance, the banks, I have friends there. There are a lot of insane things happening there. And a lot of that corruption, because of government procurement, is actually instigated from the private sector, because there is somebody who's willing to give, and therefore you corrupt these government people. So I think we did, and even in the churches, so every aspect of our lives has been touched by this scourge. So I think that we need to broaden the conversation beyond just public sector corruption to look at various other elements.
Does the war on corruption then need a crusader, somebody that leads the charge and leads the fight? And many people say that is the president, and that he has perhaps in some respects not done that as he should. Yes, it is everybody that is corrupt, but ultimately somebody has to take leadership of that and say, this is the direction in which we're going. Some say the president hasn't done that. Abdikadir, has he? And is there somebody else? Because people look to the opposition and say, well, we don't see that person either.
Well, let me say this way, Yvonne. My view on avoiding corruption or bringing corruption to an end is that there is a possibility to do that. You know, corruption, if you look at it, looting of the government funds comes through a process, starting from the procurement process at certain ministry level all the way until it gets to a bottleneck whereby there's one or two people who have to press a button called the GPay system that pays you, that pays the corrupt person. The infrastructure is there. But the problem is that right from the person seated in that particular position, because central bank is a bank that is required, that is supposed to be, the regulator of other banks. If you look at the NYS issue, and I don't want to go into details on this because it's a live investigation still within Parliament, but I'll tell you, there is no way that institution like central bank, for example, can walk away from this. Because you want to say that you have remitted money to the other banks, you want to blame the banks, and we don't blame you. The government system has been created in such a way that everything in terms of government payment right at the end is being brought to a bottleneck so that somebody can be able to control. Can the president do something about it? I think he can.
What?
What he can do is that he can make sure that the right people are in the right places at the central bank. And if such a things happen, then the people who are there, who are part of the executive, should be held responsible for this.
But you are the ones who vet these people in parliament.
No, look, vetting of these people when they come in cannot be an excuse to say that they should not be oversighted on. You know, Senator,
but the oversight is still done by Parliament.
No, that is true. That is true. That is true. But the executive is supposed to control. You know, there is control. Unfortunately, a lot of the oversight role of Parliament, things like public accounts, is more of a postmortem when corruption has already happened, unfortunately. But the point I want to make is that you asked a question, can somebody else do it? I think, yes, we can. I think it just requires a commitment right from the top to say that corruption ends today, because there is more money looted.
And you believe that
there
any one of the NASA leaders who will be chosen to be the flag bearer,
I believe so, yes,
will be able to do that, and has proven beyond doubt.
I have personally worked very closely with my party leader, Raila Odinga, and I understand, and I know his vision very well. And I can tell you that I can confirm that he is going to have a zero tolerance policy on corruption. And it's going to work.
But you see, the problem I see with that is that we cannot pretend that we are not working under the current constitution that we are working on. And none of the people running on whatever party ticket are running have not been in government for very many years. So I do not know what is going to be reinvented when you say that there's going to be zero. There has always been zero tolerance to corruption in this country.
Has there?
I mean, that is what we are... No, listen. I'm saying we have always been told there is zero tolerance to corruption. Whether it is true is a different, an argument for another day. But the issue I'm taking with my friend and colleague Abdikadir Aden here is that when he talks to us about people coming in to bring a fresh air, they're the same people. They have been there for very many years.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has also been there
for very many years.
So was even in the so-called Nusum Kate government.
And he's been there. So when somebody tells me somebody else is going to bring in a fresh breath in the whole system, people who have been there for more than 100 years, I mean, cumulatively, then it becomes to me like a joke.
So then
I think I'll go back to where Dr.
No
Awiti
fresh
stopped.
thinking into this, because even the president and the deputy have all been
There's a lot
in government before.
Let me finish by saying this. I'll go back to where Dr. Awiti stopped. You know, we assume that corruption is something to do with the government only. Yeah? First of all, government doesn't do business. It's the private sector that does business with the government in procurement and what have you. I think we must start from that point. The point Dr. Awiti made, and I think this is the underlining point, is that we are having a very serious social problem.
So Senator, who changes the social...
you and I.
And how do we do that?
Because we have...
Should somebody lead that charge?
Yes, exactly. We have EACC, and that is the institution that should be leading the charge against corruption.
Is it?
And it should not be dithering like it seems to do, and it should not be telling us about handles. We have not seen a single person convicted of corruption in this country for a very long time, and corruption is happening every day. We have not had a single person, we have not had a single lifestyle audit done against a single person, and you don't have to be told by anybody. When you see governors, when you see people, public officers, suddenly showing so much wealth and still nothing is happening, then there's a problem.
Because this is a legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta when he came in and talked about empowerment for women and youth and 30% of the tenders in government. And then even there we have seen corruption. We've seen people talking about how much money in millions they're carrying in gunny bags. And some say that in fact this AGPO has created another type of corruption, which is tenderpreneurship. This is the president's personal legacy, a promise that he made, and that now is in itself mired in corruption. So what would you say to that? Why hasn't he taken special attention to this issue? And why do we see now people, some of them whom allegedly are even close to him himself, now getting involved in tenders and that sort of thing?
You see, most of this corruption is happening in the county governments.
No, I'm speaking specifically with respect to what's happening at the national government.
Even
the tendering,
even the
NYS,
county, yeah,
the Afia
that
House
is
scandal. I mean, it's touched quite a number of people. It's a live wire. But let's speak about at the national level, which is where the president, remains supreme.
I go back to where I started. That the trouble, and I'm not defending or holding brief for anybody, because I stand personally against corruption in whatever nature it takes. But the point I'm making is this, that we sometimes expect too much from the person called the president in how much he can do. Some of you may not remember, and maybe some of you remember, there was a time when the president could order you to be detained. And that's it. End of story. And then you disappear incarcerated. There was a time when the president could say, do this to so and so and so and so. But now we have an independent judiciary. What happens in the judiciary? I don't know. I haven't practiced law in the courts for a very long time now. But what happens in the judiciary determines a lot about what would then happen about these issues that we discuss of corruption.
Do you think that the new constitution is restricting the president in terms of what he can achieve?
It is indeed, because we have a constitution.
What would you change to give him more
power? We cannot go back now. We cannot go back to the centralist system of government. I think we have moved on. We're not going back there. What we need to do, in my opinion, my very considered opinion, is to strengthen the institutions that we have, even as they're independent, make them very, very strong institutions. And once we have strong institutions, each institution can be able to stand alone and say, this is what's going to be done. Because the DPP, for instance, is a very, very powerful office. Very powerful office. If the EACC sends a file to the DPP, and the DPP's office, for the sake of argument, I'm not saying this is what's happening, is compromised, then every work done by the EACC is for nothing. If the DPP gets a closed file and takes it to the judiciary, and the judiciary is again compromised, then again it's for nothing.
So I think it's a question at the parliamentary level, would it not?
I think you see what happens is that I think what will happen is that we don't need to necessarily say that we're going back to a powerful presidency that's going to be a solution to corruption.
I
don't think that will be. The reason being, the biggest corruption is happening at the national government level. This is where the presidency has a direct control over it. This is where the challenge is. My worry is that looking at the Moi regime and the Kibaki regime and now the Uhuru regime, corruption came from rampancy to occurrences, though major, during Kibaki time, but clearly coming under control. But again, we're going to full-blown rampancy in terms of corruption, happening literally almost everywhere. And this is where my biggest challenge is. This is why we don't have money to pay doctors, for example. This is why we don't have money to pay our lecturers, for example. This is why our economy is going down the drain. There is corruption literally even when the government is making the people believe that it's going for a noble action, such as borrowing from abroad. There is unfortunate, and the definition of corruption is wide. Misuse of the public funds. And it is exactly what is happening. Unfortunately, the country continues to sink into more and more debts, not because there's heavy investment in infrastructure, but because there is more rampancy in terms of corruption.
Okay.
That is where my worry is, and that is where I think somebody at the top needs to. Let me be honest with you. When President Uhuru came into office, and when he made his first speech to us in Parliament, I was very optimistic. Knowing his background and how he was brought up and, all this, will there be any appetite for him to steal? I don't think so. I don't even think at personal level he is now, I wouldn't say he's stealing. But unfortunately, he appears to be saying more tough words than actions that is coming through his whatever. This is a guy who can issue presidential directive that can radically reform the national government infrastructure and institutions. It is not happening.
Okay. Dr. Witi, Senator is talking about, there's only so much the president can do, and in terms of strengthening a number of these organizations that fight that. But some would say that the president has an opportunity that he has missed. For example, he has the tyranny of numbers in Parliament and can sort of push for a number of these legislations to strengthen these parties, and that in some sense, do you agree with Senator that he's helpless in a sense?
I think there are many levels of collective failure of leadership. If you look at both houses, for instance, with Jubilee and its numbers, I think oversight has not been robust, it has not been effective. I think a lot of these individuals who are in the higher levels of government who are corrupt. The Senate, both Senate and Parliament have jurisdiction over those through the various committees to summon them and to speak with them. As Honorable Senator said, the vetting process, the individuals that we get into some of these institutions, if they're suspect, then fingers should point directly at Parliament. What was that process of vetting and clearing these individuals? And I think strengthening institutions is one thing, and we talk about this all the time. Tell me what the judiciary lacks. Tell me what the Anti-Corruption Commission lacks. What is it that they lack? In my view, the only thing they lack is leadership and a resolve to tackle this vice of corruption. Yeah. This is not Uhuru's problem. This is our problem too as citizens.
And so you're
by
saying
failing.
Parliament has a role
Parliament
to play.
has a huge role.
Mheshimiwa, you sit in the national legislature. A lot of questions about vetting, even with Philip Kinisu, that Parliament itself failed to see this so-called conflict of interest between his company and its dealings with NYS, and that in that respect, surely the president can't have sat there during the vetting and said, okay, you know, make sure there's due diligence here. But some say that Parliament itself, which, you know, is composed of members from, you know, both sides of the political
let me
divide,
tell you, Yvonne,
failed in that mandate.
Where we will take responsibility as Parliament is, unfortunately, the tyranny of numbers has not been helpful. Let me just say it so. But it is not just an excuse to throw everything
But in
at
these
Parliament.
vetting committees, surely,
let me tell you.
they're
Yvonne,
bipartisan.
Yvonne, let me tell you. The name is being referred to Parliament. By who? By
Parliament can reject it.
But hold on, by the presidency. That person should have been vetted by the national. You want to tell me that the NIS did not know, and this is where I'm talking about institutions that we have.
But the vetting organizations in Parliament, the vetting committees do receive some of these reports from the NIS and can request
I don't sit in the vetting committee, and I wouldn't tell you whether we did receive or did not receive about the intelligence report, and I doubt we will. But what I have an issue with is that why would that person? No, you wouldn't be given.
But
you don't enjoy the privilege.
But here's
you don't have the right to be given intelligence briefs.
Here's the
There's
interesting
limits
thing,
to who is to be given
Philip Kinisu
intelligence
himself
briefs.
did raise the issue of his dealings with NYS.
Yes.
And parliamentarians completely missed that.
Yeah.
And so that there must be some responsibility taken by the National Assembly. Let's keep vetting aside. But the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, of which you are a part, of course, the predecessor, which is traditionally headed by the opposition, was mired in scandal. Sharing of billions of shillings, allegations of that, it was back and forth. Surely, even at that point, this body that is set to oversight the executive also failing in its mandate, and so there's quite a bit of mud to throw around.
I am not in any way attempting to defend corruption in any place. There is corruption, and I agree. There is corruption, alleged corruption, in Parliament, not just in one or two committees that were disbanded in the past, but even in the institution itself as Parliament, as in the past. We have seen reports on the EACC. What I want to say is that the issue of Parliament and the issue of Kinisu, for example, that name is brought. You know that this is a name driven by Jubilee. Jubilee has a tyranny of numbers in the committees, on the floor of the House. There is nothing much that you can do about that
But you can still
issue.
come back to the people
you
and
see,
say, here is a problem.
Let me tell you, go and listen back to the Hansard debates on those issues. Some of these issues have been brought up on the floor of the House, on those individuals.
You know,
but at the end of the day, it goes to a vote, and the tyranny of numbers comes.
Mheshimiwa, you're sounding a bit like Senator who says, you know, there's only so much the president can do. You seem to be saying the same thing. There's only so much Parliament can do.
Parliament's failure in this term is the issue of the tyranny of numbers.
No.
There are a lot of very infamous things that have happened and even legislations, very, very controversial legislations, some of which attempted to control even our media freedom, as you will remember. And many of those draconian laws, they pass through Parliament. Why? Because of the tyranny of numbers. So some of these failures that you are contributing to Parliament or National Assembly, for that matter, or even both houses as Parliament, is largely to do with the so-called the tyranny of numbers. It's been one of the problems.
I don't think so, Yvonne, because we have the judiciary, and if Abdikadir Aden is not satisfied that the law is proper, but it has gone through because of tyranny of numbers, there is nothing to stop him or anybody else, a citizen, to petition Parliament or to petition the Supreme Court and to have that law reversed.
We've done that
and
many
a lot
times.
of laws, some laws have been taken to the courts and have been the courts have said they are not proper laws. So it is what Abdulkadir is saying is not right. We have good and sufficient laws in this country. That I can tell you. Very good and sufficient laws on corruption, on vetting, on everything. But there is a lot of time there is no will in the relevant institutions. And here I must go back to the word institutions, because there is nothing that is not provided for in the law. And everybody knows what they should be doing. The Public Accounts Committee knows exactly what it should be doing.
Okay.
And you've raised a very important issue about what has happened to the National Assembly Parliamentary Committee on Public Accounts Committee over the last few years. And that is a committee that is traditionally chaired by the opposition.
All right.
So the issue of tyranny of numbers here doesn't arise at all.
I'm sorry to cut you short, because I'd like us to do our closing statements now. As we've come to the end of this, Senator, I want to start with you in terms of where do we see ourselves? I mean, you can say a lot about what the president has done. Kenyans are seeing scandal after scandal. I mean, for sure, there have been quite a number, big, explosive. The president himself at the start of his administration said it goes right up until the office of the president in his backyard.
Yes.
What would be different should he get a 5-year term? Would we finally get to see convictions? And would Kenyans be happy? Because at this point in time, some of them aren't too happy with what they see.
At the risk of repeating myself, let me say that the president cannot organize for convictions, right? I think we have a bigger problem as a nation. And I think we need to go back. When we went to Bombers 1 in 2003, and then the referendum that came up in 2010, one of the chapters that was very contested and that everybody fought for was on national values, right? National values. And I think we need to go, it may look simplistic, but I think we need to go back there. Because when you find our young men and women below the age of 30 saying that they are willing to engage in corruption at whatever cost so they can become wealthy, then there's a very big problem. And it's because they were not taught national values, right from kindergarten. Right from, a lot of kids cannot sing the whole of the national anthem and understand it.
It could be because of impunity as well, Senator.
No.
That they see people getting away with it.
Personally, my own thinking is this. You may think it is simple or simplistic, but I think the reason we put the chapter on national values in our constitution was because we realized that something was going very wrong. We are going to elections now, and technically, a lot of people should be stopped from being allowed to run in the national elections because they do not fit the bill in Chapter 6 of our Constitution, national values. Sadly, you are going to find that even if they are stopped at the party level or even at the IEBC level, they are going to go to court and they are going to get orders, some orders even stopping the elections, general elections, because an individual is not satisfied, that is not qualified.
So national values?
So I think national values are very important. And I think we must also accept and not push it under the carpet that corruption in this country is rampant. And we should not push the back. We should not pretend it is not there. But when it keeps saying it is the president or it's whoever, it's who of you, I want to push this problem where it lies. And I think it lies also in the institutions that we, in good faith, entrusted with dealing with these issues when we had the Constitution in 2010.
Thank you, Senator. Mheshimiwa?
My take, Yvonne, is that Jubilee as a government has failed to bring corruption under control. It's a fact. Corruption is now rampant, as the Senator agrees. And unfortunately, we cannot have a country that accepts right at the top. The president says, what can I do about it? It shows loss of conviction, loss of ability to control corruption right at the top. And that is what the Jubilee government has offered. What has it resulted in? 5 billion shilling looting at Afia House, doctors on the streets, patients and Kenyans dying. That is corruption in its life, in its real way in Jubilee, under Jubilee government. To Kenyans, this is the opportunity. That's why we have elections now in August. I can assure you that one of the principles of for us as a coalition, when we come to power, is fighting corruption head-on, straight from day one. And I can assure you that that is the way to go. This is the opportunity that Kenyans now have to be able now to say enough is enough. We are fed up with a regime that has said it cannot bring corruption to an end. Okay. And so when they go to the polls on the 8th, then I think the rightful thing to do is to bring in the alternative government. That's what happens in the rest of the world. That is how corruption is fought. Finally, the public service. It is where the problem lies. And it is because the public service is very demoralized. There is lack of meritocracy in the public service. Unfortunately, you have very junior people who are forced or pushed in upper ladders in the public service, leaving, you know, veterans, people who have served in the public service for very many years. Okay. So there's a kind of a don't care attitude. All right. So what we will do as NASA is to reform that public service and revamp and bring that motivation up.
You are now using this platform to campaign.
No, it's not campaign. I'm just pointing out what we will do against corruption.
All right, great. Thank you, Mheshimiwa. Daktari?
So I think, Yvonne, in closing, while the president is constrained in the new constitutional dispensation and that power has been distributed across different institutions in the republic, I think that Mr. Kenyatta has been a reluctant warrior. He has failed to summon national outrage against corruption. There must be leadership. You talked about that figure, that inspirational figure at the top, who basically breathes and speaks zero tolerance on corruption. That emblematic leadership has been lacking. While we understand the various constraints, but I think in many instances, when he's gone out and said, what can I do? When he said the thieves inside my backyard and done nothing after that, I think that's an indictment on his reluctance to lead that process. He might be constrained. From where he sits, he probably sees more things than we do. But even for him to say, when he was speaking at the police cooperative thing and said, well, wacha watu wajiendeleze, allowing policemen to engage in business, which in many ways conflict with the code of conduct, that in many ways opens the door for the police. I think basically to let IPOA do what it does. Now IPOA has introduced a new set of rules that actually prohibit the police from doing business. Let these institutions run without the president interfering with those things. Let him not make these statements that could be misleading. I'm sure his intentions were right. A policeman has a right to run a business, but when that business includes matatu, it includes the things that they're supposed to be supervising, that's a problem. So going forward, I think we need to broaden the war on corruption, and we need to enlist the young generation in this country, because those numbers are pretty worrying. What can we do with churches? What can we do at home as parents? What can we do in our schools? And as the Senator said, there's a value section, Section 6 of the Constitution. I think that there has to be demonstration of those values by the political class and the business class, so that the young people begin to see the role models. Where are the role models? Right. In the absence of that, it is very difficult to say one thing and expect the rest of the citizens to do something else.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr.
But
Alex,
are we through?
Here we are.
Because I was just...
Closing statements. Please. I'm so sorry, we're out of time, Senator. I would really like to, we can definitely discuss this again, no problem. I'm really sorry I have to cut you off. Dr. Alex Awiti, Honorable Abdikadir Aden, and Senator Kembi Gitura. On that, please continue to give us your feedback, whether you think the president has been successful in leading the charge against corruption. The hashtag is checkpoint at KTK. So this is an interesting scenario. 119,000 shillings is a figure you might want to remember. This is the amount of money that was awarded in Kenya shillings to a househelp who claimed that she was fired without prior notice. She went to court. Elizabeth Odhiambo claimed her employer fired her without notice. The court agreed with her, said she was wrongfully dismissed. Now, this was an interesting case because apparently her employer, as most people do, decided she didn't want her services anymore and asked her to leave. Now, this is important because the client who was representing her said that merely because a person is of low class does not disentitle them to what other employees enjoy, and that employment rights are not for a particular group of people. All of this came up because of the Employment Act 2007, which applies across the board. talking about termination that must be done within 1 month's notice, notification of the Labor Union Office, and also stipulates the rules of employment, you know, giving people 2 days off, annual leave. Do a lot of you do that? If that previous number shocked you, this is something you should think about, because over the last year or so, this is the amount generally in damages that has been paid to households for various instances of wrongful dismissal. 50,000 shillings to 1.2 million shillings. So this is an amount you want to think about, especially with these individuals that you have working for you. A number of those issues apply. So if you want to terminate them, you must give them 1 month's notice. The redundancy rules apply. So that's 1 month's salary, 15% severance pay for each year worked, as well as, you know, annual leave and payment for all accrued leave days. So these are some of the amounts that you might want to think about. Touches at the very heart of the home, and are numbers that you could be getting into trouble for, because that of Elizabeth Odhiambo was not the only case. There's a number of cases, and this is the general area of damages that has been awarded so far. Who's to say it cannot be more? So do pay particular attention to the Employment Act 2007, especially for your domestic workers. It could cost you big time. That's your number for the week. All right, so now on Lest We Forget today, as we continue with our focus on accountability and the war on corruption, we want to take you back in time over the last 2 or 3 years of the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. And we want you to listen in to various statements he's made on the war on corruption. It started out with him being fairly optimistic in 2015, but by last year, at that anti-corruption statement, he was a frustrated man. Take a look at this statement.
As a consequence, I also hereby direct that all officials of the national and county governments that are adversely mentioned in this report, whether you are a cabinet secretary, principal secretary, or chief executive of a state institution, to immediately step aside pending conclusion of the investigations of the allegations against them.
We set up a multi-agency task so that we can coordinate our affairs. Still no movement. I sit with the Chief Justice. Please, why don't we expedite this? Still no movement. As Justice Kihara, I've just heard him sitting there saying, I wish that there would be a way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, guilty, innocent, if guilty, charged. Nothing. Ni pesa nimekosa, semeni, and I'll be swearing in your new Chief Justice tomorrow. Ni nini ingine mnataka? Wewe, ni nini unataka? Sema. Ni nini umekosa? Na kama umekosa, ambia Wakenya ile umekosa tukupatie. Alright? IG na DCI, semeni nini mmekosa. Ambaye imewazuia kuprosecute. DPP sijui kama yuko hapo. Ndio huyu. Basi sema na wewe ni nini umekosa. Tukupatie. Ndio Wakenya wasiseme mimi nalinda. Mimi silindi ufisadi. Ni nyinyi mmeshindwa kufanya kazi yenu.
Lest we forget, that is the journey for the Jubilee administration in the war on corruption. From optimism to now frustration to saying he has done everything he possibly could on that. Remember to keep your comments coming in. Our poll continues. Has the president done enough to fight corruption? This, even as he prepares to make his final State of the Nation address of his first administration. That's, of course, ahead of the election. Keep your views coming in. We'll continue to dissect this and many other facets of the country as we prepare for that State of the Nation. Now, the KCB Karen Golf Masters is set to give Kenyan golfers an opportunity to polish their skills and gauge their fitness ahead of the Kenya Open tournament. The Karen Masters will kick off on Friday, the 17th. A total of 23 golfers will on Monday test the course ahead of the event. Local pros will tackle all the 18 holes, figuring out how to conquer the par 71 Karen Country Golf Club. The difficult holes are number 6 and 12. Hole number 6 is the longest par 4 at 472 yards, and its stroke index 1. It has trees and a bush on both the right and left side, and one is playing against the wind. Experienced Dismas Indiza and Brian Joroge are eyeing that title.
Ya Karen Open, sababu ni maandalizi mzuri. Tujaenda kufanya mazoezi kwa, lakini nafikiri Monday tutakuwa huko, alafu ndio tucheze hiyo Saturday na Sunday hiyo. Lakini itafanya Kenya ni sisi wenyewe tujaribu kama tunaweza kuchipula out socks kidogo, kwa sababu game ya golf ni ngumu na ni rahisi.
Going on how the old design was, you have to try and make a lot of birdies there, because your competitors will be trying to do the same thing. It's not a course where you try and play safe. But I'm going on historic design of the course. With the new changes, I'm not very sure if you can be that aggressive. But with the preparation we'll do on Sunday and Monday, hopefully we'll have a solid game plan by Saturday.
All right, so my take tonight is on the recent outbursts by the president. The most recent one being in Turkana, where he referred to someone as Shetani Mjinga. There's been an argument about who exactly he was referring to. Some people think it was the governor, Josphat Nanok, or perhaps ODM leader Raila Odinga, who was in the area just 2 weeks earlier. It matters little who the remarks were directed at. The fact is that the president referred to a certain Kenyan as a stupid devil. Please feel free to translate this into your own language. It must be much worse, trust me. So some have said the president was merely expressing himself. I've even heard others argue that other leaders have said the same kind of things, if not worse, and that somehow this is much ado about nothing. But let's all pause for just a moment. This is His Excellency, the head of state, president of all 40 million plus Kenyans, commander-in-chief, Baba wa Taifa, the symbol of national unity in the words of our constitution, the man many young boys across the country would like to become. Surely there must be other ways to express disagreement with someone. So if you think this was bad enough, what of the statement he made on return from the ICC? Words I cannot even dare repeat on national television. I thought many people listened to Michelle Obama when she made that iconic statement at the height of the US campaigns last year. She said, and I quote, "When they go low, we go high." How I wish that could be said of the President of the Republic of Kenya. But now it seems that anger is even beginning to take a toll, even on the President's sense of fact. In his Turkana tirade, he claimed that on the division of resources from oil, he merely signs laws that have been passed by Parliament and has no choice or control over the matter. Here is exactly what he said. Well, the fact is, Article 115 gives the President immense power to either assent to a bill or refer it back to Parliament for reconsideration. Contrary to that statement you've just heard, he did in fact use this very power to reject the bill on sharing of revenues from the oil in Turkana. He sent it back to Parliament with a recommendation to reduce the shared revenue from 10% to just 5% of the proceeds. So it is being economical with the truth to lay this all on Parliament. But public anger, it appears, can be quite costly. The President, who is a candidate in this year's election, even went ahead to tell the people of Turkana that life would go on without their votes. Indeed, it will. They now have a devolved system of government that has done in just 4 years what all the national governments haven't managed to do in 50 years. Some now say they do not even think about Nairobi anymore. But just what became of the so-called National Covenant the President spoke so passionately about during his State of the Nation address last year? As he prepares for yet another State of the Nation address and indeed a rigorous campaign, I can only say this: go high, Mr. President, go high. And that tonight is my take.